Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched Interview with the Vampire season 2. Let's talk about it. So yes, today we're going to be diving into my thoughts on the second season of Interview with the Vampire. I am a little bit late, and that's because last week I was too busy being in the Bear season 3 mode, okay, to even think about Interview with the Vampire. But we did get the season finale last Sunday, and so I'm eager and excited to dive into my thoughts on the second season of the show. So if that sounds fun to you guys, then stay tuned. And of course, give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy my reviews to let me and YouTube know. And as always, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Now without further ado guys, let's dive into the mess. So season 2 of Interview picks up right where we left off in season 1 with the death of Lestat, or should I say the death the death of Lestat, because yes, season 1 introduced us to Louis and Lestat and their crazy, whirlwind, fascinating yet exhilarating romance that took place in New Orleans. Well, now we see Louis and Claudia make a run from New Orleans and they end up going to the old world here in Europe, and Claudia is on a mission to try and find other vampires just like them. Unfortunately, her encounters with other vampires in the New World didn't turn out so great. She ended up being abused and assaulted, and so she's eager to run away from all of that, not only from Lestat and his legacy in New Orleans, but also from the horrible things that happened to her there as well. But luckily, she at least has Louis to drag along with her, and so they show up in Europe in the middle of World War II, where it's not really a great place to be at that moment in history. Okay, they are surrounded by death and destruction. It's a horrific time in European history and global history, of course. But Claudia is hell-bent on trying to find some signs of the old world of vampires that can hopefully take her and Louis in and show them a new way of life and help them feel like they belong somewhere. And so the first few episodes of season 2 delve into Louis and Claudia's adventures in the old world, where they end up in Romania, where of course a lot of the lore surrounding vampires originated, particularly from the reign of Vlad the Impaler. They end up meeting some interesting people and even a couple of vampires, but that ends up being extremely horrifying and traumatizing for Claudia when one of the vampires that they meet ends up killing herself, burning alive right in front of their very eyes. And so just when Claudia was trying to find somewhere to belong, other vampires to connect to, and perhaps vampires, older vampires who had more experience, who could tell them meaning or show them the meaning or purpose of their existence. But alas, that's not what she found, and so she ends up going to Paris instead, post World War II, which is again a very chaotic existence and vibe, and that's where they stumble into the Théâtre des Vampires and all hell breaks loose. They find this coven that is led by the old vampire Armand, who we find out was in the room all along during the interviews. Okay, he wasn't Rashid, it was Armand all along. And in the past, Armand was the leader of the coven that was under the guise of the Théâtre des Vampires, and they were basically running this theatre where they would pretend to be vampires all the while they were literally eating their food, getting their dinner, hunting right before everyone's eyes. And so it was this really clever trick to get a host of people to engage in what was essentially a live execution. Now it's during Claudia and Louis' adventures in Paris with the Théâtre des Vampires that we start to learn a little bit more about the vampire existence in this world, the fact that they have the great laws which states that actually you can't turn any children into into vampires, which is something that Lestat already raised in season 1, where Louis begged him to turn Claudia as she was dying. And also you have the fact that one of the laws states that you can't record the vampire existence. It can't be put to paper, and that's something that Claudia has been doing all along. So it turns out that our best buddies have been breaking these laws left, right and center. But it's not entirely their fault, because Lestat wasn't out here teaching them the ways of vampire laws and myths. Like, he wasn't out here teaching them the proper ways of vampirism. And so yeah, they've been messing up here and there, breaking some of the laws, but you know, that's something that can be looked over. It's not really a big deal. Although there is one big law, there is one big law that they've broken that is kind of a big deal. And that is the fact that they have, of course, killed another vampire. Yes, the death of Lestat continues to haunt them. And this new coven happened to have a long history with Lestat. And so one of the major secrets that Louis and Claudia are keeping from the coven is the fact that they were actually created by Lestat. And not only did they have a history with them as well, but also they killed him. And so as we dive into Louis and Claudia's Parisian adventure throughout season 2, there are all sorts of secrets that are unveiled. We learn more about, you know, Louis's time in Paris and his romance with Armand. We get to know a bit more about Armand himself and his backstory, the origins of his vampirism, but also all of the secrets and lies, and lies that he's been keeping from Louis after all of these years. We also see more from Claudia and how at first she feels so happy to be a part of the Théâtre de Vampire community. And finally, she's a part of a coven, a part of a community. That's what she's wanted all along. But there is a catch, because she is so young. She was turned at a very young age, which is against the laws, but also advantageous for the group as they create this whole new play that surrounds this new character that Claudia is doomed to play forevermore, where she has to be a child. And that's the last thing that Claudia wants, of course, because her mind has been maturing over the decades, even though her body has remained stagnant and, you know, the same old prepubescent body that she's had all along. And so that conflict arises as well, and it makes it really hard for the character to enjoy being a part of this community that she sought after. But then of course you have Louis. Then of course you have Louis, who doesn't really see himself being a part of a coven. This isn't something that he wanted for himself. He just went along with it for Claudia's sake. But Louis doesn't feel as lonely as Claudia does, because even post-death he is still surrounded by Lestat. He still sees Lestat, okay, in his mind, and he still speaks to him beyond the grave. And so, you know, that connection with Lestat hasn't been severed even with Lestat's death. And so yeah, Louis doesn't really feel the need to be a part of this coven. He's just humoring Claudia, but he does start up something new with Armand. Like I said, that love story starts to blossom in Paris, but Louis finds himself in yet another complicated love story in season 2, this time with Armand, who ends up having a whole bunch of secrets that he's hiding from Louis, that makes things even more complicated and shocking and tragic and just outright awful. And all of that is going on before we even get to the present day. This is all happening in the past, but in the present day we have the continuation of Daniel Malloy's interview, okay, the titular interview itself, which is taking place in Dubai. And Daniel Malloy is in the middle of a mess, really, because whilst he is interviewing Louis to get a better understanding of his background as a vampire, this massive expose that could change the face of literature forever, in the meantime Louis and Armand have their own sinister motives. Louis is trying to dig in deeper to find out what happened in the 70s, because he has very little memory of it, and Armand is supposedly helping him / hindering the whole process because he has his own motives and is a very shady character. Is a very shady character who cannot be trusted, and that is revealed and made very clear at the end of the season, season where we see the extent of Armand's lies and treacherous behavior. And so that's pretty much a summary of what happens in season 2 of Interview with the Vampire. Now, in terms of my thoughts on season 2, I thought it was really, really good. I thought it was a great second season. I thought the performances on this show are just absolutely phenomenal. Brilliant performances, especially of course from Jacob Anderson, who was incredible as Louis in season 1 and just as brilliant in season 2. We also had the return of Asad Zaman, who portrays Armand, okay, not Rashid. He is Armand, and he is also really great as this character. He's really convincing as this super old old world vampire who has these laws that he abides by, and I think Asad Zaman did a really great job of selling the many different lives that Armand had and the kind of quiet power and authority that he had. He's not the loudest voice in the room, unlike Lestat, but he does have that quiet power and also deceitfulness that kind of creeps in on you. Now, of course, you also had the return of Claudia herself, who was recast for season 2 after Bailey Bass's departure. Now, Bailey Bass was phenomenal in the role in season 1, but I think Delaney Hales did an equally phenomenal job portraying Claudia in season 2. She really killed it as this character who, like I said, is really yearning for a sense of community, a sense of purpose and meaning in her vampiric existence. And she, unlike Louis, doesn't want to feel a sense of shame over being a vampire. She wants to embrace all of the good, bad, ugly, bloody, but at the same time, she's also looking for something that is her own. You know, she really wants something to call her own, the way that Louis used to with Lestat, and that's what she finds in Paris, and that's why she ends up begging Louis to turn the dressmaker Madeleine to become her companion. But unfortunately, you have the schemes, the scamming of Ben Daniels as Santiago, and that completely ruins Claudia's life and her plans for herself, which is really tragic to see. But when it comes to the performances across the board, we have just excellence on this show. I mean, of course, you have Eric Bogosian as Daniel, the interviewer himself, who's always great. His snarkiness and sarcasm and dry humor is magnifique each and every time. And then you have the return of Lestat. Listen, okay, when I tell you Lestat is an icon, when I tell you Lestat is a legend. Now, we didn't actually have a lot of Lestat this season, and I'll talk about that more when I get into my critiques, but Sam Reed as Lestat, Jacob Anderson and Sam Reed as Louis and Lestat are some of the best TV show characters that we have gotten in the 2020s so far. Period. Okay, they are both incredible in their roles, and it is an absolute delight to see them, especially together. And since we're diving into the good parts of season 2, let's continue on before I get into some of my critiques. First of all, there were certain storylines that I was very much invested in. You could probably tell which ones. One, Claudia's storyline, her search for community, her search for meaning, that was really compelling to me. It especially made sense because of everything, all the trauma and hardship that they went through with Lestat in New Orleans. It made perfect sense that Claudia would want to start afresh and just find something else to hang on to and to call her own. And so she seeks that in the old world, you know, in Europe, and unfortunately, you know, all hell breaks loose. But that was a really fascinating storyline to dive into for season 2. I welcomed the new environment that they introduced us to. You know, Paris post World War II was really interesting, and even when we took a glimpse into Romania and the emergence of Soviet power there post World War II, that was also great to see. So I like the fact that we got to get out of New Orleans for a little bit and explore these other parts of the world during this timeline, as well as diving in deeper into, you know, Claudia's desire to just find something that she can call her own. And of course, that all led to the ultimate betrayal that was so heartbreaking when she ends up being killed by the Coven, especially by Santiago, by Santiago, who led the coup himself. That was horrifying. That was so heartbreaking. I was devastated when Claudia died, and I really do hope that she haunts these fools from beyond the grave, from beyond the coffin, because it's exactly what they deserve. Another part of season 2 that I really enjoyed was getting to dive in a bit deeper into the origins and some of these really old vampires. We got to see a little bit more of Lestat's origins with Magnus, who was his maker, and the dungeon, the dungeon that Magnus had, okay, for at least according to Lestat, his predecessors. Yeah, that was crazy. But also Armand, you know, also taking a look at Armand's backstory. Like, all of these backstories are so tragic and traumatic, and I thought Louis' backstory was bad enough, but these guys had it even worse somehow, and it's crazy. So yeah, I think those backstories really go to show that the whole premise of vampires, the kind of metaphor or allegory of these mystical creatures, it really lies in the idea of being othered in society. I think it's important to remember that that's what these creatures are really about. They're supposed to represent, you know, people who are on the outskirts of society, who are othered, who are treated as, you know, less than or subhuman. That is what these creatures are supposed to represent in this allegory. And so when you see these backstories, when you see the experiences of Armand or Lestat or Louis, I think it's a really important reminder of that, and it's a really great representation as well. Even when Lestat, we'll talk about Lestat in a second, makes his appearance on stage, and then you have those soldiers who have the audacity to come to this show, okay, the Théâtre des Vampires, and then they have the audacity to get freaked out about the fact that Lestat was in love with a man, and he just appears right behind them, and he's like, oh, you have a problem with this, do you? Like, it really reminds you that, you know, this is the metaphor for being othered in society, and it represents a whole bunch of groups like the LGBTQ community, like black people, like people of color, all across history that have been made outsiders and have been oppressed in some way. Another element of season 2 that I really enjoyed and I'd like to see more of is Daniel's storyline. What's going on there? There seems to be some kind of secret society that knows about vampires. So there are some interesting things going on behind the scenes. Daniel's laptop is even bugged at some point. I couldn't quite understand what was going on there. Like, it was a little bit obscure to me, but I'd like to see them dig deeper and dive into whatever's going on that front. But of course, everything changes by the end because Louis stupidly left Daniel alone with Armand after their little tiff, after their little fight. I just thought that was cataclysmic. I thought that was horrific on Louis' part. Why on earth would he do that? And yeah, he threatened Armand and said, you know, don't hurt Daniel, but that didn't mean, that still left a lot of room for Armand to do crazy things to that poor man. And after the trauma that he'd already went through in the 70s, after what Armand had already done, the fact that Louis left Daniel alone with Armand was just a massive L on Louis' part. Like, honestly, I can't forgive him for that. That was dumb as hell, okay? And Louis made some dumb decisions, but this was one of the dumbest. But unfortunately, it did mean that Daniel's life was turned upside down because he was turned into a vampire. And so we now have Daniel, who's made contact with people who apparently know about vampires and have been keeping an eye on things, some sort of secret society. And he's also in contact with the vampire world in a very intimate way, because now he's a vampire himself who has a best-selling novel that dives into Louis' story, and all of the vampires who have seen this are of course really angry because it breaks one of the great laws. So this is a really great setup for season 3. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens, not only in the past as we dig in deeper into vampire existence in the 20th century, but also what's happening happening in the present day is starting to get juicy as well. So like, let's see where this goes. And speaking of the past, speaking of diving into 20th century vampirism, Lestat. Lestat is back. Lestat is back. The drama queen that he is. When he walked up on stage, I said, oh, this is about to be next level drama. And I was right. Oh, I was right. They had a whole play that they'd rehearsed. They rehearsed the play. They rehearsed the treachery that was directed by Armand. That was directed by Armand. That was craziness, absolute insanity. But let's get back to Lestat for a second. So all of that was perfection. Lestat's return, okay, to the stage, his whole performance, the fact that he went off script, the fact that he refused to be commanded by even Armand, he was like, absolutely not. I'm not doing exactly as you say. And also, of course, the fact that he spared Louis's life. The fact that he was the one that controlled the crowd to get them to spare Louis's life and have him be exiled instead of executed like Claudia, was just a cherry on top. I don't know how to feel about Lestat. And that's the thing about these characters on this damn show. I don't know how to feel about Lestat because there are moments where I see the devil incarnate in him, where I see that he is a literal evil creature. And I'm so glad that they addressed the abuse that he put Louis through, because it was genuine abuse. And you have Santiago try to brush it off as this biased judge, jury, and executioner. But I was so happy to see that Lestat genuinely, thought about what he did to Louis, and he admitted that he didn't even know if Louis would survive that fall. It was horrendous. It was horrifying. And so, abuse has always been a part of their relationship, which makes it so complicated and so, fascinating to see as a viewer. And so I'm really glad that they did address that head on and they didn't try to obscure it or make Lestat look like, an angel after all that he did. But, okay, you still have the fact that he does love Louis at the end of the day. And so he did, use his powers, strain himself to try and get the audience behind him, to get him to be exiled instead of executed. And it's just a mess. This show is a mess. Like, I don't even know what to say at that point. But that is definitely a positive of the show, having these complex characters that aren't all good, they're not all evil, they're just somewhere murky, dark, and dirty in between. And it is just incredible to witness as a viewer. Now, at the end of season 2, we see that Lestat is in some bad shape. We see Lestat is busted, broken, eating rats, okay? What the hell happened to him in the last few decades? Now, Louis did have that final dunking moment on Lestat when he found him in Magnus's dungeon, okay? And he ended up kissing Armand in front of him, breaking Lestat's heart. Breaking his heart. And so I guess Lestat has just never been the same since, and he found himself back in New Orleans, back in his home, but he's, like I said, busted, broken, and eating rats. But now he's decided that he wants to go on tour. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that's gonna look like, but I'm very eager to see what becomes of Lestat in the present day, and if we dive into more of his past in season 3. We've seen a lot from Louis, we've seen a lot from Armand in season 2. Now it's time to get back into the game with Lestat. So that's all of the good stuff that I enjoyed about Interview with a Vampire season 2, and overall I would say I had a really fun time with this season, but there were certain elements that I was less of a fan of, which I'll dive into real quick. First of all, I did miss New Orleans. I did miss New Orleans. There was something so energetic, magnetic, and unique about that setting for this show that just, it gave vampire, it gave sexiness, salaciousness, it just had that feeling, that culture, that vibe that just became a signature of the show, and it was dearly missed. And I was delighted to see Louis return to New Orleans at the end of season 2, but it just emphasized how missed it was throughout the rest of the season. So I'm really eager to see if they're going to go back to New Orleans for season 3, at least give us a few more flashbacks from there, because the energy of that place was just so incredible that I would love to see more from it. I mean, New Orleans is the home of vampires. Yes, most of the lore may have come from Romania, but New Orleans is where it's at. I mean, just look at the originals. Just look at the originals when New Orleans was the perfect backdrop to the Michelson family mess. My second critique would be not enough Lestat. There wasn't enough Lestat for season 2, or I'm sorry. Listen, Jacob Anderson is endlessly talented and incredible, charismatic, amazing, lovable, but also extremely complex as Louis de Pointe du Lac, and I absolutely love the character and would watch it for him easily on his own. Don't get it twisted. But Sam is Lestat. Now, we did get hints of Lestat here and there as he was haunting Louis' very existence at the beginning of the series, but I just wanted more, because those two together are insane. Those two together are crack. Those two have such insane on-screen chemistry that the more that we have them on screen together, it can only be a good thing. So I hope we have more of Louis and Lestat together in season 3, but I suspect that season 3 will be diving into Lestat's story a bit more, so maybe Louis won't be featured as much. Who knows? We'll see. But yeah, not enough Lestat for season 2, I'm afraid, and it did impact my enjoyment of the show, not gonna lie. Another little critique that I have for the series is some of the dialogue is just a little bit too wordy. Some of the dialogue is very convoluted and it's poetic and old-fashioned and very vampire-y, but sometimes it can be tough to just follow what's going on and what they're talking about. There's a lot of dialogue. The show is dialogue heavy. There's not a lot of action sequences or anything like that. I mean, it's called Interview with the Vampire for a reason, but I just wish that some of the dialogue was a bit simplified. I mean, I'm not a dummy. I wouldn't say I'm a dumb person, but some of it is just overly flowery, overly convoluted, and unnecessarily complex. You can just simplify a lot of these statements to make it easier to follow along. They try to be very poetic and deep and meaningful, and I get that. It's very vampire-y, very angsty, but sometimes you just need to get to the point so that we can follow along as an audience a little bit better. So for me, I would like to see the dialogue be sharper and just straight to the point and have a bit more impact. And finally, overall, I would say that there were definitely episodes that were stronger than others. I would say that the second half of season 2 definitely, pulled up the energy a little bit. We really got going in the second half of season 2, because whilst the first half was fun, especially the episode where they're in Romania and they find that really old vampire, that was a really strong episode, but a lot of the other stuff has kind of gotten lost in the wind a little bit. I can't really remember what happened in some of those distinct episodes, but then the final 2 episodes came along and just changed the game completely. So even though I understand that they were laying down the sort of bricks for the foundations of season 2, and that's why it started off a little bit slower, I would like to see episodes that are directed in a little bit more of a dynamic way, that have a bit more impact on their own, whilst also building up to a grand season finale like they did here brilliantly for the last 2 episodes of the season. And so guys, with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving Interview with the Vampire season 2 a 7.5 out of 10. So that's it from me, guys. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Interview with the Vampire season 2, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this season down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.